Okay. This is
Yeah.
great because I love to hear this because when women have to realize, okay, it's time to move on to donor egg, there's a whole different spectrum of reactions you can get. And I'm so glad you came to it with a sense of a relief. This is a way, this is a path for me that
Yeah.
I wouldn't have otherwise. Some women really beat themselves up and are very resentful. And I totally get that. They feel like
Absolutely.
my body's failed me. I'm a failure. I have to rely on somebody else. And they have a kind of resentment, even toward the donor and the whole process. And it comes through when they contact me and they're
Yeah.
just bitter and angry, and then some women are just so grateful to have this option
You
that
have
they
the
wouldn't have
option.
had like, 30 years ago, that they're happy about the process. So you really had a really very good mindset. And it's totally fine to be bitter and resentful
It's
for a while,
natural.
and then you got to burn that off and move on, or
Of
else
course.
you're just gonna suffer throughout.
You know what? My husband said something to me very poignant and that I've held on for a long time when we were discussing it. Because why I felt so positive, of course, there was a part of me that had to grieve the idea of not using my own eggs, of not using my genetic material to have a baby. And he said to me, you know, the baby that we have, regardless of where the egg comes from, you're going to raise this baby. You're going to raise this baby with your patience and your kindness and your humor and your overall lightness and love of life. That doesn't come from an egg. That comes from how you're going to raise our children. And I'm okay with them having other, somebody else's genetic material as an, addition to what you and I are bringing to this baby. And maybe they will also be good at math. So that meant a
That's
lot to me.
fantastic. Yeah,
That
it,
really,
it takes a
and I
while. It's a
really held on
journey.
to that.
Yeah.
So, and
So
I feel very fortunate that I was able to come in with that attitude and that mindset. I sympathize with women who have a hard time with it. And you do have to be in the right place to take that next step. And that might take a little longer for some women. And I appreciate that.
So tell me, what was the experience of looking for a donor like?
I enjoyed it.
Okay.
I thought it was really interesting. I had a spreadsheet that was so long. I think that I likely considered every donor in my area. I did keep it to women in New England.
All right. So who did you reach out to first? Did you look at frozen egg banks first, or did you go to how did you, what was your first step in the search?
I felt strongly that we were going to go with fresh because, and I know that you have content about this, so I don't want to go too much into my reasons for choosing fresh over frozen. But at the end of the day, we knew that we wanted 2 children.
Right.
And so when I learned about the differences between fresh and frozen, I knew that we had a better shot at having more than one child with a fresh donor. And so that's why I went, and like I said, I know that your content on this is available.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah. Okay.
So that was important to me. So we're going with fresh donors, and my clinic gave me 6. There were 6 or 7 agencies on it was part of my packet that I received at my donor egg seminar. And so NAFG was on there. And so, but I would say every agency that was on there, I went through their donors. I was focused on women that were in New England. I felt very strongly that my donor had blue eyes. I have blue eyes. My husband has brown eyes. It would always be a long shot. But that was something really important to me. I think that it was something about if we had a baby with blue eyes, then everyone would say, oh, they got their blue eyes from mom. I just, in the process of this, held on to that.
Yeah. Just say for most people, it's really important for the donor to have some kind of physical characteristics similar to the mom. Not everybody, that we get some
Right.
outliers, but usually that's the main search criterion for most people.
I wanted her to have similar features to mine.
Mhm.
And um, and then we also looked for other things. I wanted to know that this was somebody who was I wanted to look at her hobbies and her, does she play sports? Does she, how did she do in school? Things like that. I found on the NAFG, I know it's take three.
It takes three now, but yeah, but on our site, yeah.
Yes. I felt very strongly that the donors on your site, I thought were extraordinary. The donors everywhere, I found a lot that I really liked them, but I was so impressed. And honestly, it was, I'm going to call it yes at first sight when I found our donor. And there was just everything about her. Her beautiful blue eyes, her physical characteristics, her hobbies, her passions. I just felt it in my gut that this was our donor. I think how I did it was I chose maybe 6 across the board, and then my husband and I looked at them together, and but he agreed with me that she was our first choice. And I cried when I got the email from you in Sanford that she said yes. I still have it.
Whoa, that's nice.
So the donor I don't remember what the donor has accepted, or the donor has said yes or something like that. And I couldn't believe it. And I just looked at my computer like, oh, it's happening. And I thought like, oh gosh, what if she said no? I don't know what we would have done, because I was just so fixated on like, this is I just knew in my gut, just like I knew a couple of months before that we were going with donor egg.
It's a head and a heart decision.
Yes.
It's a combination. Everyone has their list of criteria, and they could, it'd be very abstract. But then when you start looking at donors and seeing their photos and reading all about them, and they're answering all these questions about their personality, their interests, it's something that has to tug at your heartstrings.
Yes.
And so I'm so glad that you were able to find a donor, with us, that, the one that you had a connection with, and you're able to go through with it. Absolutely. So now let's talk about the actual process, the egg donation cycle. So what we do, we send you a contract, you sign it, you reserve the donor, then she goes in for screening. And why don't you tell everyone what that process was like, how much the clinic kept you up to date on all her screening, lab results and her progress, and then, the start of the cycle and all of that.
We'll start by saying it was a complete 180 from doing cycles with my own eggs. It was all good news, which was very refreshing. I was very lucky that my clinic kept me very up to date. I would get phone calls after every ultrasound, and I would get so excited.
And this is during the monitoring process, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, during the monitoring. Yes, I'm sorry.
I think your donor, she was a repeat donor, wasn't she, or no?
She was a first-time donor. Actually, that's a really important part, because I have heard from women that their clinics will, encourage them to use repeat donors for obvious reasons, but the donor that I chose just happened to be a first-time donor, and so we weren't sure how this was going to go. But I would get, through the monitoring process, I would get a phone call after each appointment. And, honestly, she knocked it out of the park. I could just tell that she was taking it so seriously. And my donor is anonymous. Never had the privilege of meeting her or talking to her.
But what you did, I'll just tell everyone, you have a code. She goes by a code. You have some contemporary pictures.
Yes.
And you have I think about 20 pages of information.
Yes, a lot of information.
We use the ASRM, the American Society for Reproductive Medicine's Uniform Donor Questionnaire. And it's 26 pages. And there's a lot of personality questions there. So you really do get a lot about her, not just her height and weight and all of that, but you get a lot about her personality.
I think so. I did really get a sense of what she was like in general. And I felt strongly that she was going to take this seriously, and she really wanted to help me. I definitely got that impression. And so, and I will add on outside of that information, anytime I had a question or was curious about something, I would call you. There was something specific that I had asked for once to see if you had, and you said that you didn't, but you would ask the donor. And then you got back to me probably within 15, 20 minutes with an answer to the question. And so I knew that she was, that she wanted to do this.
She's on the ball.
She was on the ball.
Yeah.
So,
and also I say that we do pay donors. Donors get paid.
Yes.
But they do want it to work, because to a certain extent, it's a reflection on them. They think, I was a donor myself, and I was doing it for the money, but boy, I didn't want to do it for nothing.
Right,
I would
of course
love
not.
that. You want to help somebody, you want it to work, you want to go through all this for something.
Right.
So donors do want it to work.
Yes. And she responded very, very well to the meds. And I remember being wowed by her numbers and asking, and when I spoke to my nurse, I would say, well, when you speak to her, I hope she's feeling okay. Like, this is a lot.
Yeah.
Hope she's feeling okay. And I made a point to, at every phone call, I would say, tell her I said thank you. Tell her that I'm thinking of her all the time. And my nurse, who I still keep in touch with, my nurse would kind of giggle and she's, Laura, she knows. She knows. And that really meant a lot to me. But it was, like I said, it was just such a 180, the good news. And at the end of the day, I am sure I have it in an email, but our donor performed very, very well. And it was, I want to say it was over 25, it was somewhere between 25 and 28 eggs. Like you said, not all of them were mature, not all of them fertilized, but.
And how many embryos did you end up with?
We ended up with 9 embryos.
Okay. That's a lot. Just let everybody know.
It is.
Now, were these all PGA or PGD tested?
We opted not to test the embryos.
Okay.
Which I in hindsight, I may have made another decision, but it was suggested that it wasn't necessary.
Right. It's not always necessary. There are different philosophies. Some say, mess with things as little as possible. The more you mess with things, the more chance of disruption. And some say it's a precaution.
Right.
Usually with a young donor, but I'll just say that for most people who do genetic testing on the embryos, because there is a possibility you can do the genetic testing on the embryos before they're transferred,
sure,
you're going to have fewer. So you had like 9, you said?
Yes, we would have had fewer if we
would have had fewer if you did testing. So a good number of embryos after genetic testing, if you get 3 to 5, that's just awesome.
Yeah.
Because that's just gold,
Right. We were so fortunate, and really got a sense of, we certainly made the right decision of going this route. And
so you did a fresh transfer, right?
Did a fresh transfer.
That means that, just for people who don't know, a lot of times now, as soon as you make embryos, you freeze them and then you thaw them and transfer them for later use when you do all that kind of synchronization. But you did the old-fashioned way, the fresh transfer.
And he'll be 4 on Monday.
Yeah. And that worked out, right?
It did. I knew, and I just, that's more, again, a lot of positive thinking. And I was just thinking to myself, this is going to work. I'm going to have a baby. And, but we were pregnant with that fresh transfer, and my little boy will be 4 next week.
That's fantastic. And you did another transfer later on. Is that correct?
We did. This was a little bit more complicated. We decided a couple of years later to have a second baby. And this took a few more transfers for a successful pregnancy. But, that's, again, complicated. And like I said, we may have been able to avoid some of the unsuccessful transfers but things worked out the way that they're supposed to work out. And we did a few more transfers, and then I was pregnant again through a frozen egg transfer, and I had a baby girl last summer.
So you really hit the jackpot.
I hit the jackpot
because you did one donor cycle. I mean, with a first timer.
Yes.
And you got a whole family out of it, which is great, so it was just a wonderful experience for you.
It was a beautiful experience for me.